1899. Thanks so much, Mike.
Thank you, Emily, and welcome everybody. I do tend to ramble a bit, but I'll try and keep to time so we can all escape in good time. Okay, well, this is primarily going to be about this man, William Kimber, whose gravestone is just outside, and it has a concertina on it and some bells, because he was, as the gravestone says, the father of English Morris. So, and this is a painting by Anthony Morris, very appropriate name, and Anthony Morris was a member of the Headington Quarry Morris dancers who also happened to be an accredited portrait painter. So, and that's a picture he painted of Bill Kimber, in fact, just after he died. Bill Kimber died Boxing Day, 1961. Okay, so what is that fateful day? It's Boxing Day, 1899. Now, the sort of the received wisdom, the founding myth, is that this was the day on which the great folk music collector Cecil Sharp meets William Kimber as the Headington Quarry Morris men perform in the snow on Boxing Day in 1899, and that this is the moment when Morris dance, which had been in terminal decline, is revived and everything sparks. So this is a signal day. It's an important day, and it is the iconic day. It wasn't quite like that, of course, and I'll come back later to describe what went on in detail. But first of all, just a little note: Sandfield Cottage. It's the house no longer there. It's marked there. This is a map drawn by Headington Quarry Morris dancers archivist Bob Grant, and the dark bits are Headington and the quarry as they existed in 1899, and then the greyer bits are as they were a century later. So it was a Sandfield Cottage. It was quite a large house, and the Morris men turned up there for reasons which we'll go into later. But of course, as I say, this doesn't come out of nowhere. Now, those of you who were here for Morris East's talk a couple of months ago may remember seeing this man on the left here, Percy Manning, because Morris mentioned him and said a tiny bit about the Morris dancing then. Because Percy Manning was an Oxford antiquary. He started life in Oxford as primarily an archaeologist, but then his interest broadened and he got interested in what we now call intangible cultural heritage. There was the archaeology of custom. And he became very interested in Morris dancing as a custom. And the guy on the right is Tom Carter. Tom Carter was a labourer who was born in Marsh Baldon in 1832, and he got his living, he came to live in St. Clement's, and he got his living working in the brickyards and quarries of St. Clement's. But he was an intelligent man, and he had an eye for things. As he was working in the quarry, he would spot Paleolithic implements, or he would spot a fossil coming out, and he would collect these and sell them to the local gentry who were interested in this kind of thing. And this is how he got to know Percy Manning. But Percy recognised his qualities and essentially employed him as his field worker assistant over the years from about 1893 to Carter's death in 1909. And Carter goes about the county talking to old people, finding out about all sorts of customs, including the Morris dancing. And that is how Manning eventually found this photograph. This was the Headington Quarry Morris dancers in 1875. And at this point, they were more or less in their dying days. The guy here is Frank Cummings with the fiddle, and he was their fiddler, and he died in the early 1880s. The guy, sorry, I'll go back on to... There we are, sorry, skipped on a bit. The guy, you've got the names now, the guy on the right is Black Jack Haynes, and he was the fool. And he died in the 1880s as well. And we've got various other members of the team there, including Bill Kimber's father, William Kimber Sr. And basically, when the musician and the leader, the fool, the squire of the set had died, they just stopped dancing. And they weren't alone. Morris teams all over the county stopped dancing in the period between about 1850 and 1870 or so. If you look to the period before 1850, there were probably 30 or 40 Morris teams in the county of Oxfordshire. By this time, you're down to less than half a dozen, and they were dying away. And the very last time they performed as this old set was on the Golden Jubilee of Queen Victoria in 1887, and that was the first time William Kimber Jr. danced as a 15-year-old, that would have been, yes, a 15-year-old in 1887. And then the side just stopped entirely. However, Percy Manning finds this photograph and finds out about James Hedges and John Horwood, who are still alive and living in Quarry. In fact, all of the dancers in this picture were still alive and living in Quarry in 1897 when Percy Manning finds this picture. And he encounters this picture, he sends Carter off to interview the dancers and to talk to them. And he gets the idea, I could do a bit of living archaeology here. I could get them to perform, and this would be a wonderful concert. As an aside, by the way, we don't know who the boy is. If anybody does recognise him, I'd love to know. But the box he's holding is now in the Pitt Rivers Museum. That's the collecting box. And if you open it up, you'll find the initials of Joe Trafford inside it. It was his collecting box. So we know quite a bit about the side, as we see. And mainly this is the work of Bob Grant, the Quarry's old archivist who died a few years ago. He did all of the work of identifying these people. However, here we are. We have this great idea from Percy Manning that he'll revive it. And they do revive it. And he was very keen to say, I left them to do all the practice themselves so that I couldn't contaminate it in any way. It was absolutely pure tradition. And but Carter was his intermediary, and Carter was, the producer of this concert they held. The concert was held in March 1899 and was a great success. This is a picture drawn in the Jackson's Oxford Journal talking about the concert and what a wonderful thing it was. And you'll see they've played up the oldie England aspect here, ye oldie Headington Morris dancers. The Morris dancers themselves picked that up and billed themselves like that in the course of the year. However, here they are, and they've got their fiddler, Mark Cox, on the right. The fool is William Washington on the left. Mark Cox didn't know the tunes. They hadn't got a musician. And so Joe Trafford whistled the tunes to Mark Cox, and he picked them up on his fiddle so that he could play them for the concert. And so that's how they managed. But the concert was a great success, and it says they leapt back into favour. And here they are, leaping back into favour in June 1899, picture by Henry Taunt. Quiz question, what's the name of the dog? Anybody know? Fundle. It's Mark Cox's dog. Okay. So there they are, and still William Washington on the right. You notice there's no William Kimber here. He's not involved. He was slightly on the periphery. But we'll find out how he gets involved in a moment. So here they are in June 1899. And then we come to Boxing Day again. And rather than my telling you about it, let's have Bill Kimber telling you about it.
Theo was showing me the spot where he thought you first met Cecil Sharp.
This is a lady asking
on
him.
the Headington Road, in an old-fashioned house, on the left from Carfax.
Which way?
The upper can.
Opposite
This sounds your cottage.
That's right, yes.
Oh, and that's where you first met him?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that until today.
Oh, that's the first place.
Oh, was it? I'm so glad.
Yes, you see, but before this house was built,
Is in Merryville, his
This
house.
was built afterwards. But at that time, I was work for Knowles',
Knowles the builder.
and they had the job to order Sandfield Cottage and repair it, you see. I was sent there.
Repairing Sandfield Cottage.
Well, the lady that bought that was Mrs. Birch. Turned out to be afterwards Mr. Sheriff's mother-in-law.
Oh,
Mrs. Birch was. And she was a very pleasant old lady, very nice. I used to have chats to her as she come in and see how the work was progressing. And I know one morning she come in and was talking, the birds were singing beautiful along this time of the year. She said what a lovely morning it was, and I said yes. She said, what was the hobbies of Headington?
What are the
I said,
hobbies?
"All on season, ma'am." I said, along now, I said, we were just about to go and start brushing up for Morris dancing. And she said, Morris dancing, I heard of it, still never saw it. She said, whenever you go by here, if you were out dancing, come in and let me see it. Well, this was Easter. Well, Whitson we went in there.
Whitson.
Whitson, now, for Easter, you see.
Yes.
The shop wasn't there then?
Oh, no.
No, what is it?
We went in and danced, and I know the old lady said to me afterwards, she said, never you go by here, she said, without you come in and give me a dance. I said, all right, Mum, we'll call. I was a Whitson. Well, that following Whitson to Christmas, just before Christmas, about 2 weeks before Christmas, that set in a rocker. 1894 and 5, now then.
It's wrong, 1899.
Well, that's the time. 94 and 5. We went in. That's right. We went in the Whitsuntide, that's right. But this Christmas following Whitsuntide, we was all add up. It come a terrible hard time. Well, the bands was going out, the carol singers was going out, the mummers was going out, the handbell ringers all out. Our chaps got together and they said, whatever is going on, to be all broke. What about if us has a dance? Never thought you think for her life. Ever go boys dance at Christmas?
No.
Anyway, we went. We done very well. We went into Southfield Cottage, you see, the old woman that asked me for. And she come to the window, and another woman, which was Mr. Sheriff's wife, afterward, they fed her. And then a man come, and that was him. See us dance in the snow, as hard as that. That was hard. I had a job to find a space to dance. You know, but anyway, we danced. Box went well. And as this was a coming away to get it good down over Headington Hill, he come to the front door, called me back, and he asked me if I could find time the next day to come up and just play them tunes over to him as he see dance. I said, oh yes, I can come. And I went. He played him. I never seen nothing like it before my life was. At that time of day, you wouldn't expect to see a man with a bit of paper. You play, he do some scratching, as I thought at that time of day. Get up and go straight to the piano and play. I said, oh, well, I don't know. I did. Isn't what all right, we shouldn't put right. See? I just played the treble. See? I thought, well, that's a knockout. I never seen nothing done like that before. Well, we had a glass of wine and a biscuit and had a chat. And he hoped we should meet again. We may meet again sometime. That was it. And then I come away and give me half a supper. That's what he give me.
So there we are.
Golden one. That was
He,
godsend. And the day
just
before
finishing.
we got 8 bubble piece out of dancing. And I had not no money for 3 weeks. That was a godsend of wife when I got in my tally. Well, I was 3 years after that before I heard of him again. I was on a couple of migrants I described. That's how it all come about.
Okay, so there we are. That's Bill Kimber telling us about what happened. He'd been to Sandfield Cottage as a worker during the spring, which was just after that March concert that Percy Manning had arranged. And Dora Birch, who was Cecil Sharp's mother-in-law, had said, come round whenever you were seen, whenever you're dancing. He says he did it at Whitsun, although he's not in that Whitsuntide picture that we saw a moment ago. And they come back at Christmas and notice that the gentry of the house, they actually looked at them through the window. They didn't come out to watch them. They looked through the window. Then Sharp comes and calls him back. For the next day, he plays some tunes. He plays the tunes, then Sharp goes over and plays them back on the piano, and that amazes William Kimber, who's never seen it before in his life. So this picture is not quite right, because Sharp didn't come out when they were dancing. He didn't take any notes then. And what's more, he had an eye patch on that day, which isn't in the picture, but never mind. It's good enough. And so what did Sharp do with this amazing discovery? Absolutely nothing. He wasn't a folk music collector then. He was a music teacher. Then, come 1903, he decides that he wants to teach his school children English folk songs, and that's when he starts collecting folk songs. Several years after, so 1903-ish. Meanwhile, Headington Quarry keep going. They are asked to perform at the celebrations for the coronation of Edward VII in 1902. The celebrations was postponed because Edward was ill, but they were held a few weeks later, and they got new kit for that. And this is sometimes a source of confusion in Quarry, who used to say, oh, the kit used to be in orange and green. Well, it didn't. It was only on this occasion, special kit. And what happened to these bell pads? Most of them were bought by Tom Carter, Manning's assistant. And he sold them on. He may have sold some to Manning. Unfortunately, everything Manning collected was lost in the war. But he sold them on to Balfour at the Pitt Rivers Museum, Tyler at the Pitt Rivers Museum, and he sold some direct to the Pitt Rivers Museum, and then Balfour and Tyler gave their bell pads to the Pitt. So they're all in the Pitt Rivers Museum, several sets of them. But so they were still dancing in 1902. But it wasn't necessarily all smooth going. This is known as the Pearl Assurance picture because it appears in the magazine of the Pearl Assurance Company, the house magazine. It was taken outside their offices in Cowley. And here's the Headington Quarry Morris dancers, not looking quite as spruce, if I can put it that way. Bit more this year. I've just got ordinary trousers on, fairly simple baldricks. They've still got Mark Cox playing the fiddle for them on the left there. William Kimber's not in it. So they keep going, but it appears that they didn't keep going for much longer after 1902, 1903. It had died away again, essentially. But then, this is where it really starts, in 1905. As I say, by this time, Cecil Sharp was a known folk music collector. Mary Neal, the woman on the left, was a social worker who ran an establishment for working-class girls in London, both giving them honest and not disreputable employment, and also trying to enrich them culturally by giving them music, song and dance as activities. And they'd learned Scottish folk songs, and they'd learned Irish folk songs, and from Sharp they learned English folk songs. They had learned Scottish dances, and they'd learned Irish dances. Mary Neal, knowing of Sharp as a folk song collector, went to him and said, "Do you have any English folk dances?" And Sharp remembers Kimber and gives Mary Neal Kimber's address. Mary Neal goes down to London and fetches Kimber up to teach her girls in London. And that is where it all kicks off. They organise a concert, the working girls, they put on a concert of an English May Day pastoral, and it becomes all the rage. Everybody wants to learn Morris dancing. Mary Neal's girls are sent out all over the country to teach. Now, Kimber appears to have been slightly on the periphery. You will have gathered that from the fact that he's not present in many of these. However, he was the Sharp contact. He was the one whom Sharp knew. And what's more, he could both play the music and do the dances. And so he was a very valuable resource. And he was the conduit through which everything did happen. You've got to give him the credit for that. He put a few backs out in Quarry. And although Mary Neal and Cecil Sharp started off collaborating, they fell out. And they had a bitter and extremely public row carried out in the newspapers in 1910. Because Mary Neal was full of the joys of life, and she wanted to say, yes, I'm you learn from traditional dancers and you carry it on that way. And Sharp is almost seeing it as a kind of a balletic art form in which there is one set of steps to do and you've got to do them the right way. And imbuing it with all sorts of mystical significance, including the fact that it's, in the end is saying it's a pagan fertility ritual, which it is not. Okay. Read the book if you want. So they fall out publicly. And Mary Neal says, no, everybody does it differently. She goes back to Headington and she finds Joe Trafford, brings him over. Look, he does it differently. Because everybody did it differently. There's a splendid letter from one of Mary Neal's prime teacher, a lady named Florrie Warren, who was still working with Sharp as well at this stage. And they're judging a Morris dance competition, because this was all the rage of Morris dance competitions. And there's this lovely letter from Florrie to Sharp saying, Mr. Sharp, what should I do? We've got Mr. Kimber down here, and he's doing the back step, but it's not the way we show it in the book. So do I judge them by what's in the book or by what he's showing them? And I haven't got Sharp's answer to that, but it just shows you, basically, Mary Neal was right to some extent in that there's infinite variety. There's bound to be in something as fluid as a dance form. But Sharp is the one who wins the argument in the end. It's his organisation, the English Folk Dance Society, that triumphs and then leads the revival. So it is Sharp and Kimber's view of things which triumph. In fact, Bill Kimber said, if I tell you something that's not in the book's right and I'm wrong. He said it himself. And as I say, he was a wonderful dancer. He was a big man, he was over 6 foot. And there he is in his prime. It must have been very imposing to see that. And he was described as like a Greek statue. That was a newspaper report. And the thing is that I said earlier that Morris dancing has basically died out in most of the county, within living memory. Sharp, one of the reasons Sharp triumph is that he goes out and he collects lots and lots of Morris dancing. But the thing is, as I say, Kimber, he's got a fit young man who can both dance and play the music. Here's Henry Franklin. Here's the informant for Leafield dances. The Leafield dances are very complex. They're wonderful dances. And but you see, here he is, and he's in his 80s. He last danced in 1858. And he shows Sharp all of the steps, but there was a fete at Kelmscott. And Franklin said, I can go and dance for you. And Sharp says to his colleagues, try and dissuade him. It's not a very imposing sight. But he went to the fete, he didn't dance, but there's a wonderful photo of, not of him, but of the dancing going on. You can see him in the front row of the audience looking very gruff and cross about it all. But this is why Kimber was such an important person, because he could do it. And he toured with Sharp all over the country giving demonstrations. Sharp would lecture, Kimber would demonstrate. And that is how the revival developed. And so this is his legacy, really. Here he is on the top right there, playing the music for the Steeple Aston Morris dancers. Top left, that is the Oxford City Police Athletic Club Morris dancing troupe. And there they are. And oh, look who's sitting there on the right with his concertina. It's Bill Kimber. He's teaching them as well. And the police side, they started in 1924. the May morning ceremonies we've just had in Oxford now, with all the choir singing and the Morris dancing and so on, the Morris dancing started in 1923. It was the University Morris side, who were part of Sharp's revival, who said, we're giving this Morris dancing to the city as a free gift in grateful thanks for the survival of the May morning ceremony. That's where the Morris dancing started. The police on duty, controlling the crowds, liked what they saw and decided they wanted to have a team as well. So they did. They stopped when one of their heavier members crashed through the floor on the stage at a concert they were giving. However, Kimber later on, of course, he keeps starting off quarry sides as well, but sometimes they don't last all that long. But here we are. This is him as an old man in the 1950s, I think that one is, with aside from the school here in Quarry. And here he is again with an early quarry side and sitting there. So he's extremely active in promoting and forming Morris teams. And of course, that's how Headington Quarry Morris dancers finally start up again in 1948, which time we've had a continuous annual tradition. There were sort of decade-long gaps when there was nothing happening in Quarry much, but Kimber was always active. And of course, that's what leads to thousands of Morris men crowding the streets in mass displays all over the country. So that's Kimber's legacy. That is why he's the father of the Morris. And here they are. Here he is with the 1948 side. And here is a much more modern quarry side, taken a couple of years ago. And here they are when a blue plaque was put up in St Anne's Road for Merryville, William Kimber's house. That is Chris Kimber Nicholson, his great-grandson. So that is why Kimber is the father of the Morris. I'm going to finish with his last words. This is... Kimber was one of the second recipient of the gold badge of the English Folk Dance Society. There's his badge there. That's what it looks like. Kimber's successor as the musician for Headington Quarry was John Graham. And this was the occasion in, I think it's 2019, when John was given a gold badge as well, and that's actually me giving it to him on a lovely day. You know, from all that time, from 1948 till when John died, there'd only been 2 musicians, basically, for Quarry. And John was taught by Kimber in the 1950s. So here we are. But Kimber was very proud of his gold badge and very proud of his relationship with Cecil Sharp. So we're going to finish with more of Bill Kimber telling us about the last time he met Sharp and what it meant to him.
And the next thing to corroborate it is the last letters I had from him when he come to Oxford to see me on my gold medal presented to me at New College Gardens, Mr. Hugh Allen. He had not come. He was practically a dead man then. He could hardly all like this. And I said to him, oh, what are you bringing for? She said he would come. You see, there was only two medals struck in his lifetime. Lady Trefusis had one of her first president, and it was his idea for me to have the next. And he would see it then. I'd like you to read that letter. And in the his last letter to me, and I wouldn't part with that, it's as precious to me as that Morris book. At that bottom it says there, hadn't it been for that lucky day meeting you at Headington in 1899, this venture would never have been launched. There'd have been no English Folk Dance Society today, but they'd be most precious words to me from his old friend, and pupil. He was my pupil, but the friend, he was a friend. Let me say it in all sincerity, he was a friend. When he went, I almost backed up.
Yes.
I told myself it's all over now. I've lost him, I'll be done. Because he always told me. He said, William, I shall make the day come when you put your toe back on one side. You'll always be by my side for what you have done for me. When he died, it all went. Tell you what sort of feeling that I put through you.
So there, I couldn't possibly put it better myself. Thank you very much.
So much. It's wonderful to hear that. We've got some time now for any questions. So if you pop a hand up if you have a question to ask, and I shall bring the microphone to you.
My question is that you said that the dancing was dying out in the county at one stage. Was that happening across the country?
Okay, this is where we get into history. So if you've got another hour, I can tell you all about it. The kind of Morris dancing done in this area, nowadays it's known as Cotswold Morris, although obviously Headington isn't quite in the Cotswolds. But Leafield is obviously in the Cotswolds, so it's known as Cotswold Morris. And it was primarily associated with annual village feasts, or less frequent village feasts, called wits and ales. It's a wits and ale because you brewed ale and you sold it in Morris dancers entertained. They all died out around 1850-ish. The last one was 1858, I think. And so sort of the rationale for it died away. And being a Morris dancer was quite expensive. I was able to do some calculations once that many of the Morris dancers out in the villages were agricultural labourers. The average wage for an agricultural labourer was 10 shillings. What did it cost to kit yourself out as a Morris dancer? £3. About that. We've got accounts of people buying it, so we know what it cost. So it cost you 6 weeks' wages. And then you had to hire a musician. Musicians were expensive. If you didn't get a return on your investment, as a poor person, you're not going to do it. So it had died out. It was dying out in this area. By the 1890s, you had Ensham was still going, Bampton was still going. There was a trickle of a side at Wheatley, and Headington were revived by Percy Manning. And that was it, basically. Elsewhere in the country, other forms of Morris dancing were also dying out, except in the northwest of England, where there had been an explosion of the northwestern form of Morris, which is not like Cotswold, it's a different style. But from the 1890s, there's literally an explosion. And if Sharp had only gone up to industrial Lancashire, he would have found 60 or 70 teams to show him their style of Morris dancing. But all of this was bundled up with the idea of a lost rural, pastoral, idyllic England. And so this fitted, and that didn't. But basically, that's what was dying out. It's all of the dancing around here, which was what Sharp encountered. So that's why I say it was dying out.
I'm interested in the outfits, and you were saying that they're expensive. Is it something you buy, or do they get sort of passed down through the generations?
They don't last long. If you're dancing, what used to happen in the old days when the wits and ales and Morris dancers were still around was the Morris dancers would tour the district in the week before the ale, advertising it in all the neighbouring communities. And quite often at the ale itself, several Morris teams would congregate and they'd hold competitions. One of the other tapes we have of Kimber is describing the competitions they had. By the time you've done that for a week as well, you've worn out a pair of shoes. So you need a new pair of shoes. Things got pretty battered. I say they tore the district. There's record of them sort of sleeping overnight in hedges, underneath hedges. So, yeah, you basically, I think, had to buy something fresh each year. There's an evocative account where we're not quite sure that these were Morris dancers, but we have a group of people from Bucknell, where there was also Morris dancing, and their names are the names of known Morris dancing families, because the dancing runs in families. And they were accused of stealing ribbons just before Whitsun. So, you had to kit yourself out most years and replenish most of your stuff most years. Yeah, but obviously not everything, and so I say it costed £3 to kit yourself out. Some of that you then carry over, but not everything by any means.
I'm sorry, I've got the microphone now. So nowadays, is there a shop you can go to
Okay, partly homemade, partly you can buy bells. There's the Morris Federation and the Morris Ring and a couple of other organisations, and they will source bells for you, for example, which come expensive. The Bells Engine, where we have 32 bells each, and the bells are about £1.50 each, and then you put them on leather. So you make them yourself, basically. I'm not aware of people selling ready-made kit, not least because every team likes to have a distinctive costume. So, Headington Quarry have the blue and red baldricks. Those sashes are called baldricks, blue and red baldricks. So do Oxford City and Oxford University, because they've all intermingled over the years. Bampton don't have those baldricks, they wear white waistcoats. Abingdon have a green sash. So everybody has their own style, as it were, of costume. And so if you're starting a Morris team, then you're going to choose something new, and you'll have to make it up. So people do. There's not really a Morris shop that does much. You get your sticks from somewhere and you gather them in Shotover Wood or whatever.
When did women get involved?
Ooh, tricky question. Okay.
I say that tentatively simply because my former secretary got involved.
Oh, well, on the path to ruin, obviously. Okay. There are examples of women dancing different kinds of Morris throughout its recorded history. The kind of Morris we're looking at now, the kind I've just been talking about, the Cotswold Morris, was predominantly male. That was as much as consequence of, as it were, the 19th century patriarchy as anything else. It's the way society was organised then. Women didn't do that kind of thing, not respectable women anyway. And there's elsewhere, in the Northwest, for example, I say, burgeoning development from the 1890s, that was both men and boys and women and girls, lots of them around. There was a side of women who danced in Spelsbury in the 1840s. So, it happened all over the place, but not to any great degree in this area. Then, because Cecil Sharp was the winner of the competition with Mary Neal, and he developed these ideas about it being an ancient ritual, a male ritual. So he discouraged women Morris dancers, and so the Morris Ring, which was the organisation of Morris clubs founded in the 1930s, it wouldn't have women involved at all. It wouldn't even have a woman musician for a male team, and that attitude carried on. It carried on for them until about 5 years ago. But in the meantime, lots of developments in the 1970s, associated with women's lib and that, but just generally women say. It was the wives and girlfriends of Morris men getting fed up of standing around watching them and deciding they wanted to do it themselves. So that's how it started. And, of course, when you look to the Northwest, which was comparatively neglected, the Northwest had lots of examples of women dancers going back, as I say, to the 1890s and beyond. There's a lot more, as it were, legitimacy associated with that. So, there's always been women Morris dancers, and it's the societal conditions that have determined, how prominent they are, rather than any belief system or anything like that.
Is it known how far it goes back?
19th of May, 1448. That's the first recorded example of a Morris dance being done in this country. 19th of May, 1448. Yeah. And that's, it was a group of Morris dancers being paid to entertain the Goldsmiths Company, one of the livery companies in London, at their annual feast. And this is actually how Morris dancing comes into the country. It comes in as a high-class entertainment. The livery companies were the richest merchants in the land, and they have lavish and expensive entertainments, and the same kind of entertainments are happening at the Royal Court. This is how Morris dancing comes in the 15th century, and then it sort of diffuses through the countryside after that. Before that, I'm currently working on that now. Wait for the next book. There's one over there.
Could you tell us about their travels abroad?
Well, Quarry have travelled all over the place, of course, as cultural ambassadors for Great Britain. I know they've danced in Japan and America and various other places which escape me now. But obviously in the old days, you didn't travel very far out of your district. The idea of travelling abroad is basically a thing from the 20th century and the revival of Morris dancing. So it's done for all sorts of reasons, and things like twin towns and so on. Oxford City Morris men go over to Bonn in Germany because Bonn's our twin city, and the German Bruckenberger Trachtengruppe, a folk dance group, come over from there to here. So that's the kind of context in which it happens now. But it's a modern development, and it's done for all sorts of reasons. You get American teams coming over here because they want to come to the the font of it all, the fount of it all, and dance in the places where it was originally collected. And we get invited to, Morris dancers get invited to folk festivals all over Europe and beyond. And sometimes they paid to go, so they pay for us to come. So, of course, you like those ones. But so more often than not, you'll sort of find your own expenses and they'll look after you while you're there. But you still have to get over there to do it. So it's a modern phenomenon, but in common with many other cultural groups nowadays, that it's international. There's certainly there's a lot of Morris dancing going on in all of the sort of the old Anglophone communities all over the world: Canada, Australia, New Zealand, America. It's quite strong in the Netherlands. There are sides I know in Japan. So it's mainly those countries which have a strong link back to England again, where it's developed and where you are also therefore likely to be invited to go over or find an opportunity to go over there. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think that's the time for our evening to end, but perhaps if Mike is kind enough to stick around, you might be able to catch him as you're winding up. But thank you again, Mike, for what's been a really, really fascinating talk. I've certainly learnt a lot. So let's express our thanks one more time.
Thank you.